jump into the second part of this training. Hopefully you got a chance to digest the first part and you're ready to move forward so we can get it going. All right, so truth, reconciliation, and restorative practices. Now, this is tying into that historical, oppressed, and marginalized community section. All right, truth and reconciliation commissions, they're formal processes that investigate past abuses. So when there's been a past abuse, when they hear victims' experiences, when they want to seek accountability and healing and not more so of a punishment, that is where this section ties into. Restorative justice, that's repairing harm through dialogue, accountability, and community healing. This is an alternative to punitive approaches, not a softer version of them. So think about it. In these situations and cases when you're dealing with, I'm gonna say TRRP because it's a long thing to keep saying. When you're going through this, you are doing a more formal process of investigating abuse, looking at the client's past experience, seeking accountability, healing, and all that kind of stuff, but not punishment. You basically want that person to hold themselves accountable and say, yes, I did do that. That is wrong. I didn't mean to, or, I learned my lesson, or, I deserve what I had coming to me, whatever it may be. You're not trying to punish them. You just want that accountability and that healing. And then some of the core principles here is that it centers the voices of those who were harmed. So the individuals that were abused, the individuals that were taken advantage of, this is where they can finally get some type of peace or validation in that what they did or experienced, it wasn't their fault. Accountability without punishment, community healing over individual blame, systemic change, not just individual resolution. Practices include circles, conferencing, mediation, and community building. A lot of these type of practices are done in different cultures. It's not a westernized way of doing things. So that is why it's really, 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 really important to understand that we do not push our views and our way of doing things onto our clients. How does this connect with social work? This is linked to historical and intergenerational trauma. The profession must acknowledge its own complicity, including child welfare roles and indigenous family separation, because the social workers, we've dealt with that. We've had to be a part of this systemic situation where children were removed from their home, especially in the indigenous families, where we separated the children from the families and we tried to break up communities. This is something that we have to be aware of. Canada's TRC documented residential school abuses and issued 94 call to actions. Really important, guys. Really, really important to understand. Some of the social workers, well, not some, but our social worker role and what we need to do is to understand the historical context of the harm. How is this harm individuals? We have to support community-led healing processes rather than directing them. Remember, we don't direct, but we support them. We want to advocate for institutional accountability, and we want to recognize that the community, not the social worker, leads. The community leads, not the social worker. That is all a part of this truth, reconciliation, and restorative practices. That is the framework that we're coming from. It's different than what you might be used to, but you have to understand that restorative practices focuses on community healing and systemic accountability. It's not punishing people individually. All right, so a school social worker learns that a 16-year-old student vandalized a teacher's car after being suspended. The school administration wants the student expelled. The student's family has a history of involvement with the child welfare system and expresses distrust of any institutional authority. The social worker's best approach is to advocate. Yes, we're going to advocate for restorative justice circle where the student takes accountability, they can hear the teacher's perspective, and they can develop a plan to repair the harm done. Does this make sense? Hopefully you can like or click something or message me and say that made so much sense, I understand it. Remember, restorative beats punitive. That is the goal here. Repair harm through dialogue and accountability, not just inclusion. That is not the goal here. Hey, this is for my private practice owners. If you're scheduling, charting, chasing payments in 5 different places, this is for you. I run a busy practice and systems are non-negotiable. The platform that keeps everything together for me is Jane. Clients book themselves, my schedule stays clean, charting happens inside the same system, so no late night paperwork. Whew. And payments handled right inside of Jane. Telehealth, client portal, documentation, all in one place. Clinicians don't burn out from clients. We burn out from chaos. Jane helps me run my practice like a CEO and stay grounded as a clinician. If you're ready to simplify, use my Jane Ambassador link below in the bio, and I'm telling you, Jane app is a game changer. It is going to definitely help take your practice to the next level. Section 6, Globalization, Immigration, and Refugee Status. All right, so what the outline says: the impact of globalization, immigration, and refugee or immigration status on clients, systems, and service delivery. That's pretty much the whole outline of what this section is. But it's in two halves: the client's experience and how services themselves are shaped. So there's two different fold. We want to know the client's experience, but how are we going to service these individuals? The service delivery half is where most questions land. Obviously, if you're taking the test, boom, they're going to want to know how you're going to service clients when you're dealing with immigration, refugee, and so forth. Immigration status also appears in another section under the form of exploitation. So be mindful of that. Again, I'm going through the direct outlines that are new and changed over this new test journey. So as of August, if you look at the outlines and the information on the website, it's very, very detailed. So I'm breaking them down and going over the hot hitting points that was not in the previous course or program, so you guys will know it. But if you want more details, you would go under those sections and be able to break it down and see where it's stemming from. All right, client level impacts: acculturation stress, family role reversal, language brokering by clients, migration trauma, pre-migration transit, separation from family and community support, fear of disclosure, documentation status shaping every practical decision, all of that stuff. Service delivery impacts: eligibility restrictions for public benefits based on status, chilling effect, fearing of assessing services even when eligible, interpretation, availability, and quality. These are how we deliver service. This is the impact of how we deliver services. We want to make sure that interpretation is available and is good quality. The mandatory reporting fears, they're real and they are perceived a certain way. So we want to acknowledge it, but be mindful of how we're delivering that message. Confidentiality concerns specific to immigration status, really, really important to understand. Like, we don't do that. When it comes to confidentiality and someone's immigration status, that's not our job to go around saying, oh, they're a legal immigrant. That's just not what we do. We do not ask about documentation status unless it's clinically necessary. We know what you are and are not required to report it. So if we know what you are, I apologize, we're not required to report it. Connect to immigration legal services outside of our social work scope of practice. So if anything going on with immigration, anything legal, we have to connect them to the appropriate services. We want to be able to also distinguish the difference between a refugee, an asylee, and an undocumented status. The benefits differ in what they're able to receive and what they're not able to receive. And we also want to advocate for access regardless of their status. So can you name 3 ways immigration status changes, like your service delivery, not just the client experience? Write that down. Yes, this is a part of note-taking, guys. A lot of times when we're doing test prep and we're going over content, I notice a lot of people want the answers, all the information. But a part of this on your journey is for you to research and understand it. You're pretty much given the blueprint. All you have to do is dissect it and maybe dig a little bit deeper in certain sections to have a better understanding. That's how we know you're not memorizing it, but you're able to understand the information and apply it. That is the difference in what it takes when it comes to test prep. All right, so social work at a community clinic is completing an intake with a client who recently arrived from Honduras and is seeking help for depression. The client becomes visibly anxious when the intake form asks for the social security number and says, do I have to answer that? I don't want to get in any trouble. What should a social worker do first? Absolutely clarify what information is actually required for the services, explain confidentiality, and proceed without documentation status. That is a must. So an exam tip: we don't collect documentation status unless it's clinically necessary. Never overpromise confidentiality. That part we can't do. But please, please, guys, make sure you're taking notes and understanding what we're required to ask and what we are not required to ask. Hey y'all, your girl decided to do something a little different. Yes, you see me all up on the screen showing you these gold hoops, and boom, the gold ring. It goes perfectly with my simple style. You see I got a nice little gold wedding band. Been wearing the same wedding band for 23 years. Yes. So you know I like something that lasts, something that's good quality. So I paired up with this company called Ana Luisa, and I'm like, you know what? I do test prep, but I got a lot of women on this channel and they be fly. I be seeing y'all on the little Zoom calls. So I decided, you know what? Why not partner with them? Get y'all an easy 25% off of all their stuff. I did the research. People are wearing this stuff up to 8 years. Yes, same exact rings, same exact jewelry. And you guys know I love me a good hoop. So if I can rock it with a nice t-shirt, you know, look at my Miss LCSW vibes t-shirt. You see that? You see that? If I can wear the nice little hoop with it and throw on the rings and throw them dreads to the side, honey, yes, I'm really quick in record mode. I got you. And of course, because I'm not going to do this video if they're not going to look out for my people, they're giving
giving you guys 25% off. Click the link in the bio. And I also recommend you go to YouTube and check out some other videos because their product is amazing and very affordable. Lock in.
Polyamory and relationship diversity. So this is listed in the concepts under, let's see, this it's the double 2 and an A up there, the double I and an A. It's like 11A or IIA, however you look at it and try to do it, but it's not in diversity and social justice section. It's grouped under family and couples, ironically. It is a relationship structure to assess like any other. That placement is in the lesson, treated as a normal relationship configuration. So when you're doing the test question, you want to understand that polyamory and consensual non-monogamy is a normal part of interpersonal relationships and relationship development. So when you're dealing with family couples, polyamory is in that part. You want to assess the skills. You want to look at the structure changes. The clinical task does not require you to change anything or try to put someone in a box. It requires us to have an understanding. Polyamory is an ethical, consensual relationship involving multiple partners where all partners are aware and agree. That is important to understand. And then C&M umbrella, polyamory, open relationships, relationship anarchy, and swinging. That is a part. That is a normal thing. You have to understand it and make sure you're aware of that. So overall, when we were discussing polyamory, it's really important to understand it is an umbrella of polyamory, open relationships, anarchy, swinging. All these things fall under an umbrella. Consent and disclosure are what distinguish C&M from infidelity. So if someone's out there cheating on a partner and just living their best life and seeing people, that is infidelity. C&M is pretty much consensual. The partner knows this is what they're doing. They both are in agreement of it. They both have an understanding and all parties involved are aware. So that changes it. Mononormativity is the assumption that monogamy is the only valid structure. So you don't want to have that mononormativity where we feel like, hey, if you're in multiple relationships or dating several different people, that's a problem. We want to accept and understand the fact that this is the valid structure that this couple or individuals have decided to be involved with or in. All right. So we want to affirm. We don't want to look at it as a disorder. We want to assess the relationship satisfaction without imposing monogamous standards. We want to use inclusive, non-judgmental language. We want to ask how the client names their partners and so forth. And we want to address confidentiality carefully when multiple partners are involved. Some clinical considerations: confidentiality. Who's the client? Is it an individual, a dyad? Is it the whole system, the whole group of individuals? Who is it? Document and release information can get complex when you have a lot of different partners. So it's really important to understand who is who in a relationship and who you can share information with and who you can't. Family disapproval and social stigma are some common presenting stressors. So if an answer pathologizes, I'm getting a tongue tied there, polyamory, or treats it as a problem to fix, it is wrong. Explore the client's experience without being judgmental. Quick question. 34-year-old client discloses they're in a polyamorous relationship with two partners. The client reports feeling happy and fulfilled, but mentions their family disapproves. The social worker should first what? Should they assess, provide education, or explore? In this case, you want to explore the feelings, like their family's disapproval. How does that make them feel? Never pathologize. We never impose monogamous standards. We identify the client's stated distress and we start from there. Technology and social media. This is how it impacts the clients. The influence and impact of technology includes social media, the client systems, personal and professional. We want to assess technology use as part of the biopsychosocial system. We also want to look at technology as both a risk factor and a protective factor. Never assume it is only harmful. So let's talk about ethics in the electronic practice. Ethical issues related to electronic practice sits in the values and ethics section. This is your highest weighted content area. Expect ethics framed as telehealth vignettes. You don't want to just talk about it as like human behavior information or it's framed that way. You want to also look at it as an issue and how it pertains when you're dealing with clients and you're providing telehealth services. Really, really important to understand. And then you also want to have informed consent that is very specific to telehealth platform. All right, some of the risk here: cyberbullying and online harassment, body imaging, social comparison, adolescent-like usage behavior patterns, and sleep disturbance, isolation despite perceived connection, sexting, and exploitation risk, especially in adolescents. Telehealth rules. Licensure. You must be licensed where the client is physically located. You want to use secure, HIPAA-compliant platforms only. Emergency planning. Know where the client's physical location is at. You want to maintain social media boundaries with clients and document informed consent for the modality itself. So if you're providing telehealth services, make sure you have that documented informed consent for that type of service. Technology is neither all good or all bad. We have to assess its role in each of the client's situation and not make assumptions. A social worker begins providing telehealth services to a new client who lives in a rural area. During the first session, the client mentions they are currently staying at a friend's house in a different state. The social worker should absolutely clarify, guys. You got to know where the client's current location is and verify whether they're even licensed in that state to provide services. This is something that happens a lot with telehealth, especially during the summertime and holidays when people are traveling. Remember, you must be licensed where the client is located. Always clarify location. That is the first thing you have to do in any session. And then you also want to get a telehealth informed consent specific if that is the type of service you're going to be providing for that client.